to unlock a new era of growth and scaling your recurring revenue. Work 365, billing automation, subscription management for Microsoft Partners, CSPs, and ISVs. Subscription management, billing automation, payments, and self-servicing. Transform, streamline operations, align billing with sales, create great customer experiences. Your chance to stand out. Drive growth. Drive profitability with data and business intelligence. Get started today. Create game-changing opportunities and scale your cloud business with Work 365.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another show of ISV Success Live. Thank you for making the time if you're watching live or maybe eventually you'll watch the replay. My name is Brian Galicia, and I lead our Microsoft Dynamics 365 global ISV business here at Microsoft. And it's an honor and pleasure to have Jason from Work 365 join me today. And before we get started, let me do a quick housekeeping items just to get people context to why do we do this show, how you can get involved, or just questions that you can engage on. So we do this show every Monday to really amplify the amazing work of our Dynamics ISV ecosystem, and Work 365 is no different. Work 365 is great because their use case is very specific to our Dynamics partner ecosystem, and we'll go with that a little bit more when we get to Jason. As we go through the dialogue, as you can see in the little ticker symbol below, we'd love to hear where you're watching from. So we do have a global audience that watches these or watches the replays. So if you just want to type in the LinkedIn window where you're watching from, before we really get started in the dialogue, let me do a quick shout out for the people watching. And so you, of course, you'll get your name showcased just in the live feed. The second is if there's a question that you'd like to ask Jason. So this is a live show, so we always encourage people to ask a real question. If there's time towards the end, I'll ask Jason, hopefully a reasonable question to spark conversation. And then finally, during the dialogue, if you are enjoying the conversation we're having, feel free to use the emojicon like, support, etc., because that gives Jason and I a little bit of insight into the background of our people getting value of the conversation. So with that being said, Jason, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making time. I know you're based in the East Coast in South Carolina. So the first thing I always start out with, why don't you describe a little bit, what do you do? What's your role at Work 365? And then my favorite icebreaker question I always ask my guests is, what's one thing not on your LinkedIn profile that you're open to sharing for people to get to know you?
Excellent. Well, good morning, Brian. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, Jason Thompson. I VP of Sales at Work 365. So I head up the sales function at Work 365. I've got a team that I work with both on the technical side as well as on the selling side. And as you mentioned, yes, we work with primarily Microsoft CSP, MSP resellers that have a Dynamics business. So they're selling Dynamics, they're using Dynamics, they're deep into the Dataverse. Something on my LinkedIn profile, I think, that's kind of unique about me is you'll have to drill down a little bit, but I am a CPA. So out of college, I started public accounting with a Big Four public accounting firm. I got my CPA certification. Did that for a little while. Then I worked, for a big $4 billion, private company in the finance department. Then I was a controller for a $30 million, company that had, some smaller companies roll up to it. So my background is finance and accounting. And, my wife was in sales. She was having a lot more fun than I was, right? Behind the desk, closing the books and doing all of that stuff. So I figured, let's get into sales. And I was able to make the jump and actually work for a company, in the tax and accounting space, working with applications, both SaaS and on-premise back then that, we're helping out accountants and CFOs and tax people. So I'm a sales guy, right? I am new to the Microsoft ecosystem and everything that surrounds Microsoft, which, as we all know, it's big.
Yeah, I love it, Jason. And the fact that you have that accounting background, how great that is, because especially when you think about subscription model, and how you account for that type of scenario, you can talk firsthand to the value of all those things coming in. So I always find it fascinating when people get into a very specific sales role, especially in your case as a sales executive for Work365. That background comes in super handy because you can talk in real time about some of the things that someone is faced with, especially in our Dynamics ecosystem, as we'll get into much more detail. So thank you for that additional context. And so let's do a quick shout out to the people watching live. And so Ismail, thank you so much. He is the CEO of Work365. So thank you for watching the show and supporting the conversation of Jason and I. And then we also have Todd from Fargo. So thank you so much from watching from Fargo, North Dakota. And so for those of you who don't know where Fargo is, it is smack dab in the top half of the United States. And the thing about Fargo is that for those of you who don't kind of know the history of Dynamics, that is where Great Plains and, of course, a big existing footprint of Microsoft still exists because of the acquisition we made of Great Plains back in, early 2000s. So, Jason, why don't we get started with the show? And maybe you could describe a little bit. For those you tease it out for those who got the chance to watch the very beginning. Maybe you can go and describe, what does Work365 do? What's the business outcomes you help to drive for our partner ecosystem who are driving and selling Dynamics? Because that is the use case scenario. Maybe we can spend some time really giving that context to expand on what that video, some of the things you just shared already.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, to start at the macro level, what we do is, as far as business outcomes, is help businesses sell more, right? So we don't want, the Microsoft resellers to be focusing their energies on, the compliance, basically, the provisioning, the billing, the getting the information out the door. We want them to focus on bringing on more customers and better supporting their customers, and that's really what Work365 does. So at its core, it's a subscription billing management solution, right? It was built by Dynamics CRM developers. So that's another thing that kind of differentiates us as a company. Our partners were Microsoft CSP Partners way back, and they had a successful CSP business, and they were looking to grow and scale and sell, right? Bring on more customers, but they were having difficulty managing the billing and so on. So what they did is that they really, as Dynamics resellers and Dynamics consultants, they built Work365 right onto the Dynamics platform, right, of course, and that allowed their business to scale and grow, right? Because we plug into Partner Center, we've got two-way sync. We've got the ability to prorate licenses when they come in mid-month. We can bill in advance versus in arrears. We've got really cool things around Azure and, reporting to the customer's customer as well as internally for the business to know what's going on there. So a lot of useful tools that can happen. And then because we're built on CRM, we can really connect the sales motion with the billing motion, so we can create, sync up the product catalog and give that visibility to, the sales teams to do their job. And then that all flows into, possibly Business Central if they're a Business Central user. So they've got a complete path from selling to billing with Work365. And as far as the founders, there was a point back when Microsoft said, okay, to become a direct reseller, you've got to have a billing subscription solution, and then you've got to have a self-service portal, right? And at that point, really, that's when the CSP business kind of, took second stance, and everybody went into Work365. And created the company that we are today, where we've got 240 or so customers in about 24 countries. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what a great summary, Jason, in the history that you kind of shared from the beginning. Because you think about a partner ecosystem and the number of partners that are selling Dynamics, especially in a subscription model, there's a lot. And so I think the use case that you created for the organization and that outcome scenario is very powerful. And you commented on Business Central, so I assume that end to end, not just on and it's great, it's very tightly integrated to the Dynamics platform in CE. But I assume that when the subscriptions are being transacted and the finance piece, that can actually not just be Business Central, but I assume that's also F&O if a Dynamics partner is running F&O. Is that a
That's,
fair
that's
statement?
correct. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So why don't you, in our next question I always like to ask is, what's the partner experience been like? I mean, you talked about the journey and the use case, but being part of the Microsoft ecosystem, and in particular, your use case is a little bit unique because most of our partners are selling to direct end customers, but your use case is, hey, you're built this amazing IP on the Microsoft cloud, but it's very tailored to the Microsoft ecosystem and the partners that we have in CSP, Embed, that are driving Dynamics conversations and their own Dynamics subscriptions through their model. So maybe you describe, like, what's that experience been like being in a partner ecosystem and driving this conversation?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to note is that that was intentional, right? I mean, the founders of Work 365, we talked to Ismail earlier, but his brother Abraham, and then a good friend of theirs, Yusuf, right? They had this CSP company, and they had it early on, so they were very well connected in the Dynamics community, which I guess would make it easy, but maybe not so easy when you're bringing a product to market. But the way that they did it was the way that I've always learned that you should do it as a sales leader is that they were the first salespeople of Work 365, and they talked to their clients, right? So they were also the first product managers, and so they had the trust because they were in the community, but they leveraged that to iterate on the product and to build a product that really served the needs of the customer. So it was a good place for them to be, but they, like I said, they were, because they were in the community and because the community was small, they got a lot of feedback up front so that they were able to build really a community, a product that serves a pain, because they weren't the only ones experiencing this pain, and other companies were as well. So it grew pretty good in the beginning.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Jason. You think about it, about this pain. What are some of the things that the early on that you've learned, and also just ongoing as you're uncovering opportunities? What are people using today? What are the partner ecosystem using today that they realize, oh my gosh, this is going to be done more efficient? Is it, you finding it very homegrown? Is it legacy scenarios? And what are some of the things that you've observed that people are doing or using that then drives this amazing innovation and IP that Work 365 helps address?
Yeah. So what I learned is that they're using this great product. It's called Excel. So I'm not joking, right? It's Excel macros, Excel pivot tables. I'm sure you're familiar with the Microsoft invoice, right? So generally they'll get that, they'll dump it into Excel, and they'll take hours, days, weeks to reconcile that into however they're breaking that down by client, and then client and all the multiple subscriptions, and then they're somehow aggregating that onto a invoice, or they're hand keying it into another system to kick out an invoice. So it's pretty crazy to think that that's still where, like, a lot of this world lives. But as I mentioned, I come from the accounting finance space, so I've seen this before, and I think it's probably, if I would have to guess, it's that these businesses, there's so much growth there so quickly that often they don't have the time to get their head out of the details and say, hey, we need a process for this, right? So what may work when you have 10 CSP clients is not going to work when you have 50. And that's kind of where we see them start bubbling up and say, hey, can you help us?
Yeah, no, that's great insight, Jason. Because again, like when organizations, especially in the Dynamics partner ecosystem, as they build their practice and their scenarios, they start out small, and then, to your point, every partner wants to grow, and as they grow, then it gets to these scenarios where, to your point, it becomes what used to work for 10 subscriptions doesn't work as it grows to 50, or it grows internationally when you start to do the complexities of, hey, you're not just in one market, you're in multiple markets. So that's a good segue into maybe the customer stories that you have seen so far. And you touched upon it a little bit, but maybe you can go describe, hey, what are some of the best customer examples? And, well, in this case, customer being a Dynamics partner, CSP, Embed. What are some of those use case scenarios that you have seen that really has transformed an organization. Because you talked about it. It's like, hey, they went from Excel or they went from whatever it is to a fully automated subscription solution and save time, save all these things. And then to your point, including you being a CPA, gosh, imagine when I hear people using Excel for certain things, especially at a scale that you're talking about, I think about, gosh, all the different issues of the fact that how accurate is that? How scalable is that? What happens if that Excel sheet gets corrupted? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that I've observed in my experience, but maybe you could talk about some customer examples that that you are come across.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So I think just to kind of start there with, where you ended, is that generally when we are onboard customers, right, maybe it's got to be above 65-70% of the time we are going to find errors, right? So a question that I always like to ask is how do you know your billing is accurate, right? Because what we see is that generally there are errors, and it gets back to it being a manual process. But not only a manual process, but the Microsoft price book changes all the time, right? So you've got SKU changes, you've got price changes, you've got description changes. You got to have a way to reconcile all of that. And often what people are doing is they're managing the all rather than the exception, because it's difficult to manage the exception because that's not flagged, right? So there's a lot of time that goes into that. So, well, generally we can find errors, which in turn is going to find margin, or give these businesses the ability to, hey, they'll go back to their clients and say, we underbilled you. Can we collect on this? Oftentimes, their customers will say, yeah, not a problem. We understand, right? So we're giving them the visibility into their business to get those margins where they should be. So that's one that's pretty straightforward. I know we're talking Dynamics primarily, but Azure is really a big pain point for a lot of these resellers. How do we track it? How do we understand it? How do we bill it? How do we manage it? How do we get reports that are useful to our end customer? How do we get reports that are useful for us internally? And we had a webinar a couple weeks ago where we were talking about the benefits of being indirect versus being direct, and vice versa, right? And so we had a customer panel where we had 4 customers on, that some are direct, some are indirect, some are hybrid, and they talked about the benefits, of course, of being in each bucket. But one of the participants brought up that they had just onboarded a 1 million ARR Azure client, because of the capabilities of Work 364, of Work 365, to get that reporting down to the customer level, and being able to give that or provide that through a self-service portal, so that they could access that when they wanted to access that and see, what the usage was, and drill down into that usage and so on. So that was a recent win that was really exciting for all of us.
Yeah, and those are great examples, Jason. I appreciate you also bringing it up too, because of course we focus, being, of course, where I sit in the organization, being very passionate about our Dynamics ecosystem. But I'm glad you brought up the fact that your scenario can not only benefit a Dynamics partner, but when I think about it, and you mentioned Azure, it could be essentially any CSP partner at Microsoft could benefit from this, because Dynamics is a different use case to Azure, because one is a license subscription build revenue model, versus Azure, of course, we still collect revenue, but it's consumption. Mm-hmm. And I love your comment on the fact that the times that we change our CSP pricing, it happens. And we try to get, of course, we have a policy that we have to give notification when those things occur. But I love how you just said that when those things occur, how does an organization streamline that to ensure that it's not impacting and they're not underbilling or overbilling? But I love how you just also articulated the fact that it's the optimization of not just the process, but also ensuring that the revenue optimization really comes in through what you're identifying and driving. So I know we're getting close. We have 10 minutes left, so maybe we can describe a couple things. One would be, if, again, anyone listening, if you have a question that you'd like me to ask Jason in real time, I'm happy to do so. Let me do a quick shout out to the CEO saying, hey, you know what? Looking to enable, and this is a great statement, looking looking to enable Dynamics and Microsoft partners to drive new end customer scenarios and industries that can support, that Work365 can support. And I love that statement because there's always opportunity for improving how our partners in our ecosystem go to market with us and drive that value proposition, especially in a subscription billing model. So maybe you could talk about kind of next steps, Jason. So of course, it's very tailored. Your use case scenario is very tailored to the Microsoft ecosystem. Maybe you could describe a little bit, what are the next steps? And I do want to give a shout out too, because I should have mentioned at the beginning. I think I saw that you guys are sponsoring or hosting the Community Summit, which is going to be in Charlotte, October 15th to the 20th, which is a huge event for our Microsoft ecosystem, not just for partners, but just anyone in Dynamics who cares about Dynamics and that big community. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your the things you're going to be doing at the summit, maybe people who might be attending, how they can learn more, and just in general, what are the next steps if a partner comes across this video, Microsoft partner, CSP partner comes across this video, what are recommendations of things of how they can learn more and how they get started?
Yeah, so let me just touch on Summit real quick. We will be on Summit. We will be at Summit next week. So we'll be at booth 834. So we'll be there the entire week, and just really look forward to meet as many individuals as we can to have business conversations, life conversations, right? Just to meet some people and have a good time there. So And just to back up, Brian, I do want to say that, because we are built on Dynamics, we're an advocate for Dynamics. And what I mean by that is that, we're working with a big customer right now that's on Salesforce and Workday. And I like to think that because of Work365, they're gonna, they're talking about moving to, Dynamics to CRM and Business Central or F&O, right? They want that complete end-to-end containment of their processes, and again, to align, that selling with billing, and then have it drive into their finance operation. So we get people into Dynamics because they have to have Dynamics to use Work365, and then they find out, hey, this is a good solution for us. Let's roll it out, in some other capacities. So we love to have those conversations as well. But yes, Dynamic Summit next week. Like to talk to as many people as we can while we're there. Maybe have some fun. We'll have an event Wednesday night. We're going to be at some other events as well. Other ways that individuals can get in touch with us, of course, is through the website, right? Work365apps.com. They can contact me on LinkedIn. If you want to know a little bit more about the product and really see the product in a casual way, we've got a standing Wednesday webinar that can be accessed through the website. And then we've got the App Source link, and we are on the Co-op guide, right? So another thing that's great is because we are a preferred Microsoft partner, firms are using Co-op funds to purchase the solution, which is pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate all that context and supporting the community next week, Jason. And yeah, I put a couple of things in there. They're not clickable links, unfortunately. The LinkedIn streaming experience doesn't provide that, but you can just take a screenshot or just quickly type it in. This is the link that goes to Work365's App Source listing. And then, as Jason mentioned, it is Work365apps.com as a place that you can go to their website and learn a little bit more. And because we're on LinkedIn, I would encourage you to connect with Jason or I, because of course you see Jason's profile sitting in here. So shoot him a note, a connection request. Hey, looking to go drive the dialogue and conversation. And actually, as we close out, one of the things that's great, because of course I can ask a question to myself. So Ismail's asking, hey, can you share any new features, roadmaps for outsourcing co-sell motions for partners like us? So it's a great question. I would say that there's a couple things that are happening in the Microsoft ecosystem. One is you think about AppSource and what we're continuing to do with AppSource Marketplace. Just know that there's constant evolution to what that looks like. I know today there are certain use cases that we don't support yet in a Microsoft Dynamics specific lens. But if there are scenarios, and again, maybe we can go offline. If you are a partner today, particularly if you have Azure components that can be sold on the Azure Marketplace, you can get involved in the Azure Marketplace today, create a transactable private offer so that every use case is always going to be different unless you're a partner that's doing something standalone that's repeatable. Most of the time, people need to have a private offer because you're negotiating a certain specific price point for your IP that you're selling. So that's one. I think the other one, when you think about the evolution of co-sell, I would say there's three areas that I'd always want to reinforce with partners looking to drive conversations across the Microsoft ecosystem. One, we kind of talked about it, app source marketplace, depending on what type of solution and ISV you are. That is the one first place to really maximize your time with tagging, taxonomy, the messaging, because that's the first place people are going to look when they're typing. They may not type in Work365, but they're going to type in billing subscription. And so the one thing, or whatever the partner may be, if I'm just using Work365 as an example, you want to make sure that that information is easily seen and visible and really tells the story, because that's how people are going to learn more. The second, and this is of course where Work365 also comes in, is P2P, partner to partner. And so there's opportunities where if you're an ISV that are doing something in our ecosystem and you work with either another ISV or a software implementer. And so I think in this case, if there are any Dynamics implementers going and doing Dynamics implementations in a CSP, a dynamic CSP, this is a great opportunity. And I'm glad that I'm surfacing up you, Jason, and the Work365 IP, because for any of the Microsoft Dynamics SIs or GSIs listening to this, and you're doing deployments inside a dynamic CSP partner, you should really consider Work365 to go do that because of the IP that they're driving with billing subscription. And then finally, the third piece of the pie when I think about co-sell or engagement is Microsoft engagement. The tricky part is that for the use case of what Work365 does, I don't know the amount of Microsoft partners that are actually managed accounts. But when I say managed accounts, it's meaning that they have an EA with Microsoft. And if there's a Microsoft customer that has an enterprise agreement, there is going to be a Dynamics or a Microsoft account executive tied to them. And then when you think about who sells Dynamics to that customer, it's a Dynamics specialist. And so the one thing, not just with Work365, but in general, that partners should think about is just ensuring who do you try to sell to? What's the role type? And then the value proposition of what's going to be in it for that Microsoft seller to go jointly sell. Because that's kind of the value in the engagement, is that sometimes ISVs go in and they're trying to convince a Microsoft seller to co-sell with them. And unfortunately, the scenario that they're trying to sell with, it's the wrong seller, either because that seller doesn't sell to that role type, or the seller does not get paid on whatever that ISV is trying to help us sell. So hopefully that adds a little bit of value and scenario to the conversation. And I appreciate the real-time question. So, which is great. So as we wrap up, Jason, what are any closing thoughts or before we run the video again? I guess maybe one thing too is there any AI things, generative AI, that maybe Work365 is doing? Because that's one additional thing. I mean, go to Ismail's question. That's one additional thing that I encourage ISVs to be thinking about too, is how they're taking advantage of either generative AI or Copilot to start doing specific scenarios and things. So
yeah, it's on the roadmap, right? We've talked about it. We want to be talking to our machines here pretty quick, right?
okay,
you know, show us the Microsoft subscriptions that have changed, you know, month over month.
Yeah.
rather than having to click through, you know, a few different prompts. So
yeah, absolutely. And Ismail, I guess that maybe there's one thing. He's like, hey, Jason, you maybe had some news to share. I'm not sure what that news is, but maybe as we spend the last minute, you can comment on maybe anything else as we wrap up.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, at Summit, I mentioned we are going to be at Summit, so we're going to be launching our partner program at Summit, right? You kind of touched upon that a little bit earlier, right? You know, so actually, you know, hooking up with our partners who sell Dynamics and have customers that, you know, have problems with subscription billing and are using Dynamics. So, you know, help their customers. So that's something that's going to be rolled out at Summit, as well as we've got integration with Avalara now for tax purposes.
Yeah.
And we have integration with Ingram as well, which is, I believe, the 5th distributor that we can sync up with and help automate billing for. So
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
Jason, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Work365 team, for driving this amazing, insightful conversation. For those of you who are watching live or maybe the replay, again, we do these every Monday. Next Monday, we'll have another amazing ISV joining on stage. If you want to follow all the past scenarios we've done, including this one that we just did with Jason Work365, it's just ISV Success Live or aka.ms/ISV Success Live. That takes you to my YouTube page that has the compile of all the amazing episodes, because we're on episode 82. It's crazy that because we started this during COVID. And thank you so much to all the ISVs who have been part of this journey with us. And Jason, truly appreciate the partnership with Work365 and you spending time with us on the call today. So as we close out, let me tee up the video. And again, have a great week, everyone. And thanks again, Jason.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Are you ready to unlock a new era of growth and scaling your recurring revenue? Work365, billing automation, subscription management for Microsoft Partners, CSPs, and ISVs. Subscription management, billing automation, payments, and self-servicing. Transform, streamline operations, align billing with sales. Create great customer experiences. Your chance to stand out. Drive growth. Drive profitability with data and business intelligence. Get started today. Create game-changing opportunities and scale your cloud business with Work365.